So we're just going to run through the microphones for the session, and we were specifically doing two completely different micings of the band. And so if we start with the drums, we had sort of classic Glyn Johns setup initially, which would be these two Coles 4038 ribbons, one here, one over there. And the way I always start with setting those up is 2 drumsticks distance, which supposedly is the traditional way of doing it. I only actually started doing that about a year ago because someone told me it was the traditional way and I tried it, and I actually prefer it to the way I was doing it before, which was a bit further away, so that's why I now do it that way. These things evolve. And then for the bass drum, you can see there's what looks like a U87 as a bass drum outer. That isn't actually a U87, it's actually built by a friend of mine, Silas Blackburn. And so it's an 87 to all intents and purposes, but it doesn't actually come from Neumann. And then for the multi-mic version, I think we'll start really with the overheads. We've got this pair of, cross pair of, so an XY pair of Sawyers pencil mics, they're lovely. They're supposed to be a little bit like a Neumann KM84, a very traditional Neumann, an old school Neumann KM84, not the modern ones. And I find they do sound pretty similar to that. They're somewhere between that and the shirts for me, and they sound great. For the XY, I tend not to do 90 degree above a kit. I normally end up doing 110, because I find that just gives me a little bit of extra width in the stereo image. And then for the snare drum, got the classic pair of 57s, one top, one bottom. And again, I try to always get roughly the same distance and the same angle on the top and the bottom, so you can see they're roughly the same distance apart from the two heads. And obviously the bottom one is phase reversed, because with a snare drum or with a tom, if you're double miking it, you always have to phase reverse the under mic. And then we had a Bayer 201 set up on the hi-hat. The drummer's just disappeared off to another session, so he's taken his breakables with him. Above the kit, we have a Coles, what's known as a ball and biscuit, and I sadly can't remember the actual model number of it, but I'm sure that'll be flashing up on the screen right now. And then for the tom-toms, I've used a pair of AKG 414s. This is the kind of later version 414. I've lost track of all the different numbers, but it's the one with the electronic switching, which is the bit that drives me really mad, because you have to put phantom power on before you can actually tell what polar pattern it's on. But I find the modern ones tend to be a little bit hyped. I wanted to put an extra bit of top end into the tom-toms, so I put those on there. The other thing with these is for a jazz recording, or something that sounds really open, perhaps if you're doing Americana styles, kind of stuff where it's, maybe open brushwork or just a lot of intricate detail in the drumming and no one's really hitting too hard. I put these on Omni because I love the low end balance that you get with an Omni, because it's the most even bass response, but also it means that the spill that comes in from the cymbals, and you can see there was a crash right next to this, ride right next to the floor tom, is actually, it doesn't have any of that nasty mid-range you often get from side rejection on a cardioid, and I find that it actually blends better. Of course, it is dependent that the drummer plays balanced. Our drummer today played really balanced, so that was no problem. The last thing on the kit in terms of close mics is you can see there's an inner mic there, and you'll have to come around and get another shot of that probably, which is my old AKG D12, which I've been using for the last 30 years, and that's always my bass drum inner mic. It's the first one I go for. But like with all drum recording, I have a starting position for microphones and a kind of starting setup which I would like to be able to use. If it's not available in the studio that I'm in, then I will use what's closest, and then I'll adjust, because it all depends what the drummer's playing. Everything is dependent on the musician. So if we move on to bass, just so you can see what the position was. So here we've got a Valve 47. It's again not a Neumann 47. This is another one of Silas Blackburn's remakes. Lovely sounding mic. So this is it's basically done. It's built in the same way as a traditional Valve 47. That tends to be the position that I start with if I'm recording double bass, and quite often, as you can see, it's also the position I end up with. Next to it, we put a Bayer M160. Now this is an old one, and it's a hypercardioid ribbon mic, because we were doing this two miking technique here with the kind of more open Glyn Johns 3 mic on the drum kit, and then the multi-mic version. So for the multi-mic version, we've gone for the condenser mic on the bass, which is the U47. And for the ribbon mic version, we've gone for the M160. But of course, you could mix and match that. Now, let's go on to the piano. So for the piano, in keeping with this idea of having ribbons and condensers, you see there's the pair of BM9s here, the Extinct Audios. They're quite close over the hammers. They're positioned to get a decently wide stereo image. The pianist today was playing very full range because he was improvising. And so tried to get as kind of close to the center of the stereo image of his basic parts, and then he can spread out around them. These sound very warm. I find this is a really good place to put them because it just gives that extra bit of bite that they need to cut through the track. And then for the alternate miking, we've got, again, one of Silas Blackburn's U47s at the bottom. You could use a Valve 47 or a FET 47. I like FET 47s on the low end of the piano, sound great. And then here, this is a Neumann 49, which is the FET version of this, which is a lovely sounding microphone. And so that's that combination. Again, there was a lot of fiddling with the positioning of these until we were happy with the stereo image of them, but also getting the stereo image right to suit what the pianist was playing, because that's the most important thing. And then finally, there's one last set of microphones that we've got, which if you look at the back of the room, up on that stand, there's an Omni pair of U87s to capture the room. And in fact, for the sake of this recording, they were the only things that we EQ'd a little bit. Everything else that you'll hear in the playouts of the tracks is recorded entirely flat. And that is kind of testament to the quality of the players, the quality of the microphones we got to use, but also the sound of the room, because it didn't feel like we were having to correct anything in the room. The room's really even and balanced, and I suppose that's the other great part about recording in a space like this. So that's our microphone guide for the day.